Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking about the movie Man of Steel. And I gotta say, I went into this movie wanting to like it. And sadly, when I walked out, I just wasn't happy with it. There are several good elements into this movie. There are a lot of nice nods and shoutouts to the Superman mythos. But overall, this just doesn't feel like a good Superman story to me. So let's get into it. Now, one of my biggest problems with this film is the pacing. I mean, there's several times when it's just like, come on, movie, kick it up a notch. Move it along a little bit. Where things just really seem to drag. And the way they did the flashbacks in this movie, it was just so inconsistent. Like, okay, here Clark's a kid, here Clark's a teenager. Oh, we're back with Clark being a kid again. It just didn't really work for me. Now, I'm trying really hard to judge this movie on its own merits. I'm trying not to compare it too much to the old Superman movies with Christopher Reeve, like Superman 1 and 2, the best of the Superman movies. From which, of course, with General Zod being the villain, obviously this movie draws quite a bit. And yeah, I just really did not care for that at all. To me, I liked it better when what they did in the original movie, where we start on Krypton, we see Clark, growing up, we see him venture out of the world, find the Fortress of Solitude, then he makes his way to Metropolis, joins the Daily Planet, goes out there and becomes Superman, saves Lois Lane for the first time, and is introduced to the world, and then the story continues on from there. It's a very simple, very logical progression. And here the story just sort of jumps around too much. Now, I will say this. The beginning of the movie where we see Krypton, that was really, really well done. It was interesting. It was imaginative. Lara and Jor-El were good characters. The world of Krypton is just like, wow, this looks like such an interesting place. And that's actually a real tradition from the DC Comics. I believe for a long time there was even a comic series called World of Krypton. And over the years, a lot of things have been written about the history and culture of Krypton. The whole thing of Kryptonians being genetic, like growing in these little genetic pods and stuff. Now, obviously, visually, I think they were certainly taking some nods from The Matrix. Very appropriate for a movie that, of course, has Lawrence Fishburne in it. But again, that whole thing about Kryptonians being grown in these, like, iron wombs, if you'll pardon the BattleTech reference, that's totally from the 1986 Man of Steel miniseries, which sort of was the new origin of Superman after Crisis on Infinite Earths. And just to kind of go down on that path a little further, there really are drawing from a lot of elements of the Superman mythos here. Obviously, the original movies from the 70s and 80s with Christopher Reeve, Superman Birthright by Mark Waid, a fantastic story. A lot of elements of this movie, and some of the lines, like the conversation between Kevin Costner and young Clark Kent as his dad, a lot of that is lifted from Superman Birthright. The thing with Clark going and talking to the priest, that's a nod to Jeff Loeb's Superman for All Seasons, another fantastic Superman story. And of course, we got to see some nice little shout-outs to Smallville, and just elements from the comics as well. And believe you me, I'm going to talk about some of the nods to the comics and whatnot later on. But anyway, like I said, Krypton, really well done. Loved Russell Crowe as Jor-El. Really nicely done stuff there. Although, is it just me, or does it seem a little strange that a piece of Kryptonian technology from 33 years ago, and that's how old Clark is supposed to be in this movie, works in a Kryptonian spaceship that's 18,000 years old? I mean, yeah, they had keys hundreds of years ago. I guess you could say that, if you if you looked at a key from hundreds of years ago and you looked at a modern key, you'd realize that both were a key. And depending on if you, I'm not even going to try and explain that. That was just kind of dumb. But hey, whatever. It's alien technology, so whatever. Anyway, So let's kind of move along there. Let's kind of talk a little bit about the whole Smallville thing. One thing that really bugged me about this movie, in addition to the pacing, is that there's really not a whole lot of Clark Kent in this movie. We get to see flashbacks to Clark when he was younger, and that stuff was pretty well handled. But as an adult, it's really just about him as Superman. And that's really not the way to do this. What's going on with him as Clark Kent needs to be important, because that's the way Superman sees himself. Sure, he has this Kryptonian name and he has this Kryptonian heritage, but he was raised as Clark Kent. That is who he thinks of himself in his head. And this has been demonstrated in the comics. There's this really great story in Justice League where they were doing some kind of mindscape thing. We got to see the heroes of the Justice League as they saw themselves. And Superman saw himself as basically just a farm boy with a Superman cape. Really nicely done story. I think that was Joe Kelly that did that. And anyway, here, the Smallville elements are really very weak. I mean, Superman's mother she's done reasonably well, and you got to say Kevin Costner, really, really nicely done as Jonathan Kent. And even though he does have that scene where he says to Clark, like, yeah, if it looks like letting some people die might be what you need to do in order to preserve your identity. Well, believe you me, I was calling some serious bullshit on that. But what makes that scene work is later on in the movie where he sacrifices himself to preserve Clark's secret. That's what really makes that whole thing of Jonathan Kent's character work. He is willing to sacrifice himself to protect Clark's secret. Him urging Clark to sacrifice other people to protect his secret, no, not cool. But when push comes to shove, Jonathan Kent was willing to sacrifice himself to protect his son's secret because he just didn't think Clark was ready. And I also got to say, the whole thing with Clark saying to his dad, like, Jonathan, you're not my real father. Well, that's pretty BS too. That's just not something Clark would say. But what makes that scene so work, that line is kind of redeemed, is by the fact that that is basically the last thing he ever says to his father. The whole Jonathan Kent thing dying there and leaving that horrible emotional scar on Clark, that worked. Although if you stop and think about it, Jonathan Kent died trying to save a dog. Wow, dude, not exactly the best choice, huh? I mean, noble and all, but your wife and son kind of need you. You really should have just written off the dog. Oh, and incidentally, did you notice that the dog was named Shelby? That was actually the name of Clark's dog on Smallville. Yeah, he had a dog for a while who was named Shelby. So, nice little nod there. And wasn't the dog in Superman Returns also Shelby? Am I thinking of the right movie? I didn't really care for Superman Returns, so I've only seen it once. Anyway, let's see. I was also disappointed that characters like Pete Ross and Lana Lang were just so incidental. I mean, Lana has, 2 lines in the whole movie? God. What a waste, huh? I mean, look at what Annette O'Toole did with that role. And of course, she came back to be on Smallville as Clark's mom, but still, seriously. Lana is so much a part of the Smallville story, and with Pete Ross. And apparently, they also somehow worked Whitney Fordham in there. I had no idea who the heck he was. Apparently, the jerky dude who was shoving Clark around, that was Kenny Braverman. And I only found that out because I actually sat through the credits and was watching that. Now, that's kind of cool. Kenny Braverman is basically, long story short, Superman is the hero that came from Smallville. Conduit is a guy from Smallville who grew up to be a villain from the Superman comics. One I was actually always rather fond of. I thought he was a very nice counterpart to Clark. So it would be kind of cool to maybe see Conduit as a future villain for this movie series, although he was never really a very high-profile guy in the comics. There was also some other nice stuff. We see a garage that's called Sullivan's, obviously a nod to my favorite Smallville character, Chloe Sullivan. And let's talk about a few more of the nods. Obviously, I'm sure you guys all saw the LexCorp name pop up a few times. We saw it on a truck. We saw it on the side of two trucks. We saw during the big fight with Zod at the end, like the future site of LexCorp headquarters. So I think it's pretty safe to say we'll be seeing Lex Luthor in the sequel, which has already been announced. Just looking around through TV tropes today, I saw that apparently the satellite that gets destroyed when Clark and General Zod are fighting was a Wayne Enterprises satellite, and it used the Wayne Enterprises logo from the last Batman movie. So I guess they are for real about starting to set up everything for a Justice League movie. But anyway, getting back to the story itself. I like Amy Adams. She's a good actress. She's been in a lot of cool stuff. I just really wasn't feeling her as Lois Lane. It's not that she did a bad job. It's just there really didn't seem to be a lot for Lois to do. I mean, she's in the movie because it's a Superman movie and you have to have Lois Lane. But yeah, I just really wasn't interested in Lois as a character at all. Of course, we have Lawrence Fishburne as Perry White. I know when he was announced as Perry White, a lot of people out there got really upset about that. It's like, no, Perry White's a white dude. It's like, okay, first of all, Perry White is a very incidental character in this movie. And second of all, Lawrence Fishburne is a great actor. And you should be happy to have somebody of his caliber in this film. And to his credit, Fishburne does a good job with what he's given. And I did like that Perry White, he's shown to be a brave guy. He helps save Jenny. He inspires Steve Lombard, the sort of jerky reporter guy from the Daily Planet. And Steve Lombard is a jerky reporter guy from the Daily Planet in the Superman comics. He ultimately, stops being enough of a jerk to help Perry rescue Jenny, who apparently, from what I've heard, is supposed to be Jenny Olsen. They decided for some reason to make Jimmy Olsen female, except that she's just apparently some random office worker who doesn't have red hair and is really the only thing that she has in common with Jimmy Olsen is that the first letter of her first name starts with J, the last letter is Y, and she works at the Daily Planet. So why in the name of God didn't you just use freaking Jimmy Olsen? So yeah, we also kind of got Emil Hamilton, the scientist dude, another character from the Superman comics. Didn't really have a whole lot to say about him, which is disappointing because I always thought Professor Hamilton was an interesting supporting character, but they don't really do a lot with the guy here. We also had Colonel Hardy, played by Christopher Milioni from Law & Order SVU. A guy with some experience in the DC universe. He was actually the voice of Hal Jordan in one of the animated Green Lantern films that came out a couple of years ago. And he certainly does a really nice job with what he's given here. Not exactly the most meaty of roles, but one thing I did like is that his code name is Guardian, and Guardian is a Metropolis-based superhero who is also a supporting character in the Superman comics, so that was cool. And him, battling out with Faora, Zod's female lieutenant, the stand-in for Ursa from Superman 2, that was pretty cool. And I'll give this movie credit. Faora was really badass. I liked her. Not sure. I'd have to stop. I actually liked her better than Ursa from Superman 2 because she's a much more go out there, get her hands dirty. She gives Clark that sort of nice speech about evolution and morality, and she shows that she's a serious challenge, much more interesting than just the big silent dude who was the stand-in for Nod or whatever the hell that dude's name was. Yeah, that was whatever. And anyway, General Zod. Let's talk about him now. It really is hard to top Terrence Stamp's performance. I mean, sure, it's hammy as all hell, especially with that whole kneel before Zod thing. which wasn't even in this movie. How do you have General Zod without Kneel Before Zod? I mean, come on. They even had that when they did General Zod on Smallville. You can't have General Zod without that line. Now, granted, it's not Kneel Before Zod, son of Jor-El, the way everybody says it. It actually goes slightly differently in the movie, but, whatever. You can't do the movie without that. And did you notice they didn't even have the classic Superman theme? I mean, yeah. I mean, you can't do a Superman movie without the Superman theme. I mean, come on. Even Smallville gave us the Superman theme. And although to its credit, Smallville came back from really sucking to deliver a very solid 10th season. Okay, let's not harp too much on that. Let's kind of continue on. I'm just looking here at my notes. Okay, we'll get to General Zod in a minute. No, let's just talk about General Zod now. Okay, General Zod, this is a fairly decent take on him. I mean, it's certainly not the very hammy, very straight-up classic villain that we got from Terrence Stamp. And that's a good thing, I think. If we went down that road, it just would have been a retread. So they're trying to do something different with General Zod. And I can respect that. Kind of like I can respect them trying to do something different with, well, okay, I'm sure we've all seen Star Trek Into Darkness, so yeah. Just on the off chance that you haven't seen it, I won't spoil it. But you've probably figured out what the whole thing is by now if you haven't already. But I'll still leave that out. Anyway, now I do like that speech that General Zod gives at the end, where he reminds us that he was literally genetically engineered, trained his whole life from birth to be willing to do anything to protect Krypton. Morality be damned, Krypton will be protected by Zod. Krypton will be rebuilt by Zod. And when he does that, it's hard not to have a little bit of sympathy for him. You have to wonder how much of what he is doing is really his choice, and how much it is just what he has been conditioned to. How much choice does he have in what it is that he is doing? But then after Clark destroys the Genesis chamber, and why was there a Genesis chamber on some tech that's been laying around? I guess it's something they salvaged from the base. I'm not even going to try and think about why they didn't just go and set up a colony somewhere. I guess I'll assume that there was some logical reason involving that codex bullshit that meant that they couldn't do it. But yeah, of course, that also means that Superman destroyed God only knows how many fetuses that were in there, so yeah. And that's another thing that bugs me about this movie. Did you notice that Superman, yeah, sure, he saves some people, but he sure as heck doesn't do very much in the way of protecting them. Like, even in Superman Returns, Superman takes a second to use his heat vision to destroy some debris that would have otherwise fallen on a crowd. Here, Superman doesn't really do that. I mean, sure, he'll help somebody out if it's kind of along the way while he's fighting somebody, but he does not go out of his way to protect people. But anyway, getting back to General Zod. So, after all of this stuff is destroyed and he realizes there's no hope of rebuilding Krypton, he ultimately makes the decision it's like, okay, I'm just going to go and kill humans just because it'll piss off Kal-El. And that's what, firmly pushes him across the line into villainy. The problem with all of this is that it leads to the ultimate scene of Superman trying to stop General Zod from using his heat vision to kill some people at the train station who apparently can't think to run around the debris that is trapping them there. And Superman can't think of, flying up to get General Zod out of there. I mean, literally, I was watching this with two of my friends. I'm like, seeing that scene, I'm like, fly up. And my friend who was sitting next to me, she goes, but it wouldn't be as dramatic that way. I'm like, well, yeah, but they also make Superman look like a friggin' moron. And it just doesn't feel like like Superman making that desperate choice to take a life. It doesn't really feel like he's been like he hasn't really tried anything else. He's just basically tried punching Zod in the face. It just does not feel like he has been driven into a corner that badly that there is no other choice. And Superman killing someone with anything other than the absolute there is totally no other choice, that is just so against what the character of Superman is about. I don't even know where to go. Now, to be completely fair, there was a story in the comics where basically General Zod and Female Funky and the Big Dude escaped from the Phantom Zone. Superman did everything he could, and he ultimately had no choice but to use kryptonite to kill them. And in the comics, he was so mentally messed up from that, he literally went off into space for a year to try and console himself with what he had done. Here, apparently it's been a couple of weeks and Clark's off at the Daily Planet. And yeah, I know I'm really accentuating the negative here, and I do apologize for that. I really do try to look on the bright side of things, but again, there's just so much of this movie that I just wanted to yell. Did you notice that Clark does a really sucky job of trying to hide his secret identity? Like after he saves Lois in Smallville, he drops her off in that cornfield, flies off and goes to fight some more Kryptonians, and we see a police car, Lois flagging down a police car. Later on, after the fight, Superman goes to check on his mom at the farm. Lois shows up in the police car. The only way she could have that could have worked out is that if she had told the cop, "Take me to the Kent farm." And if you watch that scene, you can literally see out of focus in the background some cop sitting there, arm on the hood on the roof of his car, just watching Superman, Martha Kent, and Lois have a chat. Oh yeah, and then there's that whole scene at the end where Superman drops off the missile, the drone, and says, "Hey, stop trying to figure out where I live. Oh, by the way, I was raised in Kansas." And did you notice that they did an incredibly lame-ass job of explaining just how it is that Lois figured out who he was in the first place? God. Oh yeah. And let's not forget the complete and utter this movie turned into disaster porn. I mean, seriously, how the hell many tens of thousands of people in Metropolis had to have died? And that's really what it was. It's like, okay, let's blow up some more buildings. Now, I do like that they're showing that this sort of fight between super beings would wreak absolute havoc on a city. And apparently, conveniently, constantly knock the main characters into places like IHOPs and Sears and 7-Elevens. One thing I read, this movie scored $170 million from product placement. Yeah, oh, by the way, in case you didn't notice, Lois Lane uses a Nokia. Man, I think this officially tops the excruciatingly glaring Marlboro cigarettes truck from Superman 2. That's the one element of Superman 2 that I really hated. Well, that and that little where he pulls off the chest, his logo from the chest, and does that frisbee bullshit with it. Oh yeah, and hey Superman, I know that Lois is glad that you saved her and all, but you really shouldn't be taking time to make out with her while there's still God only knows how many people trapped in the rubble of Metropolis. I mean, I can grant you a quick, hey, thank God we're all still alive kiss, but seriously, dude, stop kissing the chick and go save all the people who are probably going to die in the next few minutes if you don't do something. And let's see, what else? The whole Clark Kent thing at the end, that was tacked on bullshit. Seriously, that's all it was. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I want to talk about. Well, I've cleared through my notes, and frankly, I'm really just tired of complaining. Like I said, this movie had some nice elements. There was the nut of a good Superman story in this. But it just feels like it got too caught up in trying to be dark, trying to be too much like the Batman movies, and forgetting some of the core elements that make a good Superman story. I'm actually a friend. I'm actually buddies with this guy named John Layman, and he's actually one of the guys who's currently writing the Batman comics. And on his Twitter, he did not care for this movie, and one of the things that he said about it was that it was joyless. And while there is the occasional laugh in this movie, and there was that really nice scene of Clark kind of laughing as he discovers that he can fly. Overall, that is actually a pretty accurate thing. There isn't really any much in the way of joy or happiness. There's very little wonder in all of this. And that's sort of what you need. Superman is supposed to be like that. He is supposed to have these fantastic elements to him. Now, the way they do this, the speeches they make about how Clark and Superman can inspire good in the human race, that he can help build a better world. And look at the people around him. When they realize that Superman is a good guy, when they see him doing these heroic things, whether it's Colonel Hardy or Professor Hamilton or Perry White or Steve Lombard, they step up and they do brave and heroic things. And that's good. That's what Superman does. Superman is supposed to inspire in each and every one of us to be better, to be the best. It's like Jor-El says in this movie. He can inspire every single person on the planet to do good. And a being who can do that should not be joyless. A being who like that should inspire, should have a lightness, a humor to them. And around them should be a sense of wonder that anything is possible and that we can, in fact, no matter our limitations, no matter our sins, no matter our past, we can be better. We can be good. We can all be a force for good in the universe. We can all be Superman. And that's just not there. That is just not there in this movie. And it breaks my heart. Superman is my favorite superhero. I love Superman. I've always said to myself that if I ever got a tattoo, and I made this decision years ago when I was still a teenager. I'm not really the sort of person that would go out and get a tattoo, but I always promised myself that if I did, right here would be the Superman logo. So I just want you to understand how much love I have in my heart for Superman. And I always want to see another good Superman story. And this movie tries. It really does. But it just doesn't get there. It lets what is currently trendy and fashionable and what they think will make money override the elements that are needed to tell a good Superman story. But there's always the sequel, right? I mean, this movie dropped some pretty obvious hints that we'll probably be seeing Lex Luthor next time around. And I sincerely hope that the people that make this movie will listen to what people are saying and be willing to lighten things up a little bit. Now, as I said, they did have a lot of good things going on in this movie. Krypton was beautifully imagined. The fight between Superman and General Zod, while it ultimately veered into disaster porn, was still one of the most spectacular fights between superhumans in movie history. I mean, this even beats out Avengers in some ways. And of course, they kept the elements like the great speeches that Jor-El and Jonathan give to Clark about how he can inspire people and do good. Those are cool. Those are all there. But they need that, and they also need to have, like I said, just the joy and the wonder that a character like Superman really requires. Okay, folks, I've been at this for half an hour, so I guess I should wrap it up here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe, and of course you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. Till next time, take care and have a good one.